Brought to you by Penguin. Recipe for Life by Mary Berry. Read by Patricia Hodge. I dedicate this book to my husband Paul, and also my loving and supportive family, always there for me and always with me. Chapter 1. In the words of my father, my birth caused no end of trouble. I arrived on 24th of March 1935, 2 weeks before I had been expected, on the day that my parents, Alan and Marjorie Berry, had been scheduled to move house. Not at all convenient, as you can imagine. When my mother went into labour in the bedroom of their maisonette on Park Street in Bath, the removal men had to be sent packing, and the disgruntled new tenants persuaded, by Mum's doctor, to delay their own move. Years later, in his memoirs, my father would record my birth as follows. After coming to Bath, for a short time we lived in a converted half-house, maisonette, and Mary had the confounded cheek to be born there when she should have arrived a fortnight later. It was certainly not to be the last time that my father would have cause to despair of his only daughter's flightiness. Thanks to the inconvenient timing of the arrival of Mary Rosa Allen Berry, it was a week behind schedule that my family moved into their new home at 5 Park Lane, opposite Bath's Victoria Park. My father, who was a surveyor, had designed the house himself to accommodate his growing family, which, as well as troublesome week-old me, also included my 5-year-old brother Roger. My younger brother William would arrive 4 years later, and one of my earliest memories is of seeing him as a chubby baby sitting in a high chair in the kitchen at Park Lane, tied in with a loop of woolly blue fabric of the type used in school to show whether you were in the red team or blue team. In those days, it was thought to be clever financial planning to have your children spaced so widely apart, but it's not a bit good growing up, as you have absolutely nothing in common with your siblings. We're the greatest of friends these days, but as a child I was just beaten up all the time by my big brother. Although we only lived there until I was 7, I still have vivid mental snapshots of the house at Park Lane. The steep drive, the nursery painted with lions, tigers and elephants that gave you the thrilling feeling of sleeping in a zoo, the tiny family bathroom, and the enamel-topped kitchen table with the crank-handled mincer screwed to its edge, which was used to grind Sunday's roast beef into mince for Tuesday's cottage pie. But it is the garden that I remember the most clearly, almost down to each individual plant, as we played outside endlessly. I would spend hours building dens amongst the tangle of shrubs at the bottom of the garden. My friends and I would huddle together in our makeshift camp, talking, planning, and making up stories. By the time we'd moved to our next house, South Lawn, our dens had become so sophisticated that we could cook in them. We'd build a fire at the back of the den and fry whatever we could get our hands on in a little pan, usually bread, but we sometimes went up to the hens and would sneak an egg. One of our dens even had its own supply of hot water. We would light a fire, contain it within a border of bricks, and run a curved pipe through the middle. You poured water in one end, and then it came out the other into a bucket, warmed by the flames. Can you imagine what the health and safety police would have to say about that these days? I'm not sure if our parents even knew about it. At Park Lane, we were great friends with the Dakin children who lived next door, Tony, Bobby, and baby Janet, and whose garden was linked to ours with a 5-bar gate. My mother would often send me through the gate with messages for Mrs. Dakin. On one occasion, it was Mr. Dakin who greeted me and told me that Ivy's in the bath. That seems so funny to me, because I never knew Mrs. Dakin as Ivy. The boys would often beat me up. One time I remember Bobby Dakin pushing me into our ornamental fish pond. I emerged spluttering amongst the dark green water lily leaves. But having grown up with brothers, I was a bit of a tomboy and would sometimes give as good as I got. I once challenged my younger brother to a boxing match, convinced I would win, although William managed to get in.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?